It is Tuesday. It is Tuesday.
I just want everyone to know that we batch record these, so I hear that terrible song and participate in this terrible song every single time, like 4 or 5 times in a row. You seem to find
Also, Kristina is hungover, and this is the most fun I've had all week. So, but
she enjoys trolling
we
me.
are talking about sex.
Yeah,
baby.
Just get it out.
I just got in shit from Kristina for singing the actual song, so I'm sorry for you guys if you have an earworm.
if any kind of song comes to mind, think of that to yourself in your mind. Okay, right now, here's your time to do that. But let us talk about sex. Let's have this conversation. I'm so grateful to Hannah for making this introduction. Hannah on our team, on our Bombshells team, you are amazing. Thank you for making this intro to Diana. Diana's such an exceptional advocate for safe, healthy, individually
pleasing
and determined relationships. And when I say relationships, I mean it in every aspect of the word. So this is for anyone. We are talking about a topic that a lot of people can hold very strong opinions about, both for themselves, for others. This is a be brave, live full conversation in the sense of, we've both shared uncomfortable things. We've all shared uncomfortable things. And I'm sure that there will be things that come up while you're listening that might give you a bit of discomfort, and
take what you like, leave what you don't.
Yeah. And
there's no need to take anything on that you don't agree with or like.
Exactly. And what I am so excited for us to get into now is the conversation around having conversations, and that is for anyone, no matter whether you're happy in your sexual life right now or not happy, whatever the case is. If there's some trauma, if there's some things that you just don't want to really think about or talk about, I hope that we've created a space for you to just explore in as much as you want to, and maybe get some tips and tricks and tools and some really good insights that you can sit with and do with what you will. I've had such an incredible time on this one. Really did. There's a lot of and
I think
laughter.
We were very open. This is probably a more vulnerable episode for the both of us. So
yeah,
enjoy
this. We're
diving
started.
In.
Oh my gosh. Sometimes I wish there was pre-roll and it was recorded at the start, and then we decide later what goes in and what doesn't. But then I feel like the other side of me, the Jekyll to my Hyde or vice versa, would then be like, no, this is a terrible idea, because then we would think it was a really funny idea to put this on. And then we'd look back and people would listen and say, these are two crazy people. And a poor guest.
But that might be fun.
I think that is why people would tune in.
I don't like that I just
They need to see our full crazy.
I don't like that I put that idea in your mouth.
She knows we're going all the way now.
I can see it. I can see it happening.
This is the thing. You have a co-founder who is getting her master's in persuasive communications. I can say nothing. I have to protect myself at every juncture, because now you're her ally. That's it. I'm by myself with my Bailey's coffee, trying to live my best life at 10 in the morning on a Saturday, having done 2 podcasts. One was highly uncomfortable. The other had, other people involved, so it was less uncomfortable.
But and also, you guys just lost out on like
the etymology of hair of the dog is what we were talking about.
Yes.
That's pretty fun.
I think it was
do their own research.
Intriguing. So you guys can go look that up and wonder how it got into putting yogurt in the vagina.
Whoa.
That's
what it went to. That's what it went to.
And then Raquelle was like, hit record. And of course, because she Professor X'd me, I was like, ding.
Didn't even think about it, just did it.
It was so quick. I'm impressed.
I'm not. I feel like I've given up my thoughts.
Oh my
aren't mine
gosh.
anymore. So welcome.
Yes, to the Bombshell Brunches podcast.
What a great way to start. This is the perfect way to start, by the sounds of it.
We're all nursing coffees.
Diana and I were speaking yesterday, and Diana said that she was really looking forward to having a casual conversation. I did not prepare her for this level of casual.
This is the kind of this is what my brunches look like. I host brunches every once in a while. This is exactly like I take a dildo and I stick it to the wall. Like that's literally my brunch. Like every time people are like, you don't know what you're gonna get, and you're also gonna get.
You show up in a restaurant and you're just like, whoosh.
Maybe I'd be better if I actually did it at a restaurant. I just did it at home, but there's always something that happens.
That's how you know it's brunch time.
Dildos on the wall.
Let us commence.
That's how we start it.
Oh my gosh.
Never dull brunch at my house.
No, never. I mean, good Lord, we're coming over for
I was going to say, I can't wait for our invitation.
Oh.
It'll be fun. I'll find something else to stick to the wall.
Oh.
We'll throw some yogurt.
There we go.
Some yogurt.
Brunch has begun.
Oh my gosh.
Good. Well, I'm welcome, everyone. Good job, us, for doing this on a Saturday morning. And Diana, thank you for also joining on a Saturday morning, which is normally, sleeping and brunch time, So
this is fun. This is just as fun.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I hope we don't prove that statement wrong. I'm going to do an introduction now because I feel left out of the introductions because Raquelle's been doing them. So it's my time. I'm reclaiming some of my thoughts back.
Shine, baby.
Diana is a counselor and certified sex therapist. After filling up her practice in a short couple of months, she took her love of sex therapy and established Allura Sex Therapy Centre, Vancouver's leading counseling practice that exclusively focuses on sex, sexuality, and relationships. Here's me pitching constantly to be the voice of the sex therapy.
I can hear
your phone lines, your book, your you name it.
Yeah. You're so welcome in advance. Anyway, so her passion for this work spans across a variety of issues, from lack of desire and pain during sex to shame around sexual interests and attractions. Her mission is to help people find pleasure in their lives, develop an authentic and connected relationship to their sexuality and relationships, and throw out the messaging and beliefs that society has given them that holds them back. Yes, thank you. She loves supporting other therapists in developing their skills in this work and loves that she gets to spend her day helping as many people as possible become more comfortable and confident approaching the topic of sex and sexuality.
What?
It's so much fun.
I just have to say that I am very impressed with this bio. And this is me just having a nerd moment. But the reason I say that is because I love the verbiage of being so supportive of other therapists and developing these skills. This is a collective societal issue, and there is so much about this that deserves that weight and that importance. And I love that you've in just these 10 lines really found a way for all of us to connect to, that's what I'm missing. Yeah, that's a really important point. Yes, we do need to be having these conversations in different ways. I don't know how to do it, so kudos to you for a good bio.
Thank you. It took me a while to write it because I have like really professional bios. I'm like, I don't think this is what they're looking for, so you got to write something else.
Wait, was filling up, was that a pun? Because I read it as a pun.
No. Okay. That is not. I mean,
get your mind out of what shouldn't be the gutter. Which should be a normal conversation. Get your mind out of your mind.
I mean, we started with dildos on the wall. My brain had to go there. It was primed. Yeah. It was primed.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, what a wonderful topic, and I'm so happy and very, very grateful to Hannah. Shout out Hannah, our co-producer, who does all these amazing things behind the scenes with the rest of our team as well. But Hannah, thank you for introducing us to Diana. Tell us about the background. Tell us why you chose to become a sex Is it sex counselor, sex therapist? What is the term?
I feel like I know people kind of use them interchangeably. There apparently are differences. I usually use sex therapist just because I do quite a bit of deep work with clients. It's not as like, do this position and it'll be amazing.
You know that I'm going to be jumping on all these puns.
Oh, without a doubt. Write them down. Take
you
notes.
Just said, okay, this is, we're just,
I do this a lot. Oh, yeah? I do this a lot, apparently. It's just naturally.
You do this deep work a lot.
I do this deep work a lot. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, I usually use sex therapist. That's my go-to term.
How do you feel about sexpert? Because sexpert, an expert in sex, a sexpert.
People say that a lot. I'm like,
You don't. Yeah, I said to Raquelle, I was like, it's what we've got to be careful. It doesn't sound like sex perv.
But I feel like that, nobody else.
No, I've ruined it. Now I've ruined my own thing.
Okay. It's okay. It's a term. I feel like it's a term that people like to use when they maybe don't know actually as much.
Right.
I like see. What you do and what it is. So how did you go? Because I'm assuming you started as a counselor and then transitioned into sex therapy. So what made you do that transition? What was intriguing about this area specifically? Like what hooked you?
So I actually started in sex therapy. I knew even before I did my master's, I was actually already priming myself to do sex therapy. So I do a lot of other types of work because I don't just work in the idea that sexuality is a vacuum. I can keep going on about that later. Ooh. But it was really, I love this question every time because it's always like, my mother told me I would be a really good sex therapist. And that is how we started. And it was the most awkward conversation of my life.
So you didn't get the birds and the bees. You got like, you should be.
No birds and the bees. Until I was 19. I think I was 19, somewhere around there. I think I was 18, 19, hanging out with my mom. And she looks at me. She's like, you'd be a really good sex therapist. I had no idea what a sex therapist was at that point.
What happened before that? Like, were you
just did she know what a sex therapist was?
I like how she knew and I did not know what that was. We were watching TV. It was like Dr. Jess, not Dr. Ruth. I'm like, everyone goes to Dr. Ruth. I think it was Dr. Jess on TV, and she's like, you'd be really good at that. Mind you, my mom and I had never talked about sex up until that point. So I was like, I remember leaving. Right? I was like, what? It was really awkward. I left and I talked to my roommate. I was like, my mom told me I'd be a good sex therapist today. And we laughed and we moved on. And then we came back to it a few years later when I'm like, I think I want to be a sex therapist. And she's like, remember when your mom told you that? I was like, yeah, I do.
Oh, wow.
And she kind of holds it over my head a little bit. She's like, you're doing this because of me. Like, yeah, that's what I want to tell people. I do this work because of my mother.
Or my mom.
That's who got me here.
Oh no.
So what do you love about it? What do you love about being a sex therapist? I love just making people feel like they can talk about anything. It's really the comfort piece. It's so, I'm going to say fun. People don't like that. I call it fun, but it's fun to have someone come in the room and have so many, wow, there's a pun for you as well, come into the room and they are so nervous and so scared, and just putting them at ease that they can talk about it, and there's nothing that's off limits. There's nothing that's going to scare me. And really there's nothing that should scare anyone. But I feel like I'm the chance to model that for them.
Can I ask a question? Is there any time in your life where what you want to do more than anything is have someone walk in the room and as soon as they sit down, be like, vagina, penis, Like you just yell like sex words at them. And then
I do that or they do that?
No, you. Like I just in as you.
Why would she want to do that?
I don't know. Just.
I mean, I do that. I do that in some way. I use the word vagina or penis in session at least.
But straight away,
times.
you're like, like so that you just like so that people laugh. And for me, when I don't know, maybe it's a cultural thing, but if I'm nervous, I laugh. And so if someone like comes up into my face and is like vagina, penis, and like yells all these things, then we laugh, and then we've said it, and then
I'll take note. I'll take note. Next, if I ever meet you in person, that's what I'll do. I'll just walk.
Oh my gosh, please!
And be like penis, vagina. all the I can throw more words out there.
Just have this like a whole list of words where you're like, oh, okay, then it's normal. Now, welcome to the penis vagina room. Stick it. Just stick it on there.
Stick the dildo on the wall.
Session begins.
That's how you know session has begun. There's a dildo on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, great. Sign me up. That was a sidebar. Sorry. Yeah.
I like it. I don't even know how we got there.
No, this is how life
the
goes.
ADHD in me is like, I was like, let's talk about that now.
that we went left. Okay, but we were talking about the comfort piece. So people come in, they feel super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a really big thing because I have a number of friends who work in the medical field, and I was talking to them about this, and they were saying, we don't get trained on how to talk about sex.
Yeah.
But we have, and it's really surprised me, a lot of people coming in to talk about sex. But they don't necessarily have the training for it. And I did notice that you do workshops for other therapists, other counselors, doctors. I'm sure there's people that I'm missing that you talk to.
All the people.
all of the many people. And one of the things that you actually noted in those workshops was being aware of your biases, and I mean, I would presume being able to circumvent that. I think that's so important for all of us in any field that you're in. So can you talk about that a little bit, especially within your field? I can only imagine how prevalent that is and how hard that is to do.
Yeah. Everyone thinks that becoming a sex therapist or anything in the field of sexuality is knowing all this information. And I mean, yes, that's a part of it, but the biggest part of the training is actually like doing a lot of uncovering of your own biases, beliefs, experiences that unknowingly you will bring up in session. And even if you don't want to, it's actually not about eliminating, because they're always going to be there. We always have some sort of bias. And even if we can unpack it, they might show up still. And it's really more about noticing when you're going to say something that's really not the client's and it's yours, or when the client says something and you start to kind of think about your own experiences, because that's just what we do. Our brains kind of take the lead and do their own thing.
We want to relate, right? I mean,
we
think
do.
as humans,
it's the easiest way to relate is through our own experiences. And that doesn't always help, because sometimes the experiences that we have or beliefs that we have are just harmful and are probably going to perpetuate more shame, more pain, more and actually sometimes people have had experiences where they don't want to talk about sex anymore. They don't want to unpack this because they've had those negative experiences with doctors, even with other therapists. So really a lot of the work, and it's the work that people don't want to do because they think it's not important, or they know their biases. And the truth is, you never really know until you're sitting in a room filled with 20 people and you're watching basically porn on TV in a classroom setting, and you're like, okay, so I do not like the look of a penis. Good to know. That is how I feel about that. And you don't recognize that until you're actually doing that in that setting, which is really, that's exactly how they train you in this. You sit in a room with colleagues and you watch explicit material all together.
Wow.
Yeah, that is exactly how they do it.
Wow. That was like not what I was imagining whatsoever. Yeah. But
that's how I do my training. Like now that when I do my trainings, like I just pop on a video of basically
sit back and sip your tea. Like
literally I sit here and watch people get really uncomfortable as I play a video of Betty Dodson doing her body sex workshops, where they all end up like masturbating in a circle at the end of it, and watching everyone get really uncomfortable with the fact that they're just touching each other's vulvas to like not even a sexual way, in like a really like curious, maybe like, oh, look at this lip is longer than this one, and you have, and she describes it in weird like architectural terms. And so
is she on Netflix? I feel like I've seen a documentary where she was
what's her name away recently, Betty Dodson. She did have I think she had an episode on Goop, which I don't want to start about Goop because I could get in a I could start the yogurt in the vagina.
That's thank you.
I'm really angry about Goop, but beyond that episode is really good.
Yeah, put the cranberry juice away and put the yogurt away.
Yeah, put the glitter also away. Do not put glitter in the vagina, please.
What? Sorry, excuse me. I was with you for cranberry juice and yogurt. Like I put those two things together in my mind. But
as long as it's just your mind.
Just in my mind. Yes, I put them together in my mind.
Don't put them in your vagina.
But
I guess
what is the glitter?
It's a glitter bomb. It explodes glitter out of your vagina.
Sorry.
Who cleans that out?
That's a good question. Maybe do this in a hotel. Don't do this in a hotel room.
Don't do that. Don't be an asshole about your vagina.
They tell you put too many things in your vagina. Don't put random things in your vagina, please.
Just don't do it.
Just don't do it. No one wants to clean that up. Doctors don't want to have to take anything out. Don't do it. Or your butthole. Don't do that either.
I was just gonna say, leave the light bulbs alone.
Yeah. Flashlights alone. The cucumbers, the zucchinis, please put them away. We've lost Kristina. We've lost her.
No, now I just can't. Now I'm just thinking. Every time you're. I am like I like to profess that I am a mediocre actor, and so but I clearly apparently have no control over what imagery then sits in my brain running around as you're saying these things. I'm like no.
I like to picture it like a water balloon. That's how I think of. I've never actually seen it. I just read a lot of articles about it, and it's just I picture like a little water balloon filled with like glitter and like gel, and then when you like pop it, that's kind of like my idea of it.
But okay, what was it like? Why would people do that? Like what do you achieve? You're like, yeah, rainbows. I'm just like,
no, I think it's a new experience. It's like,
okay, sorry, but I don't currently have another new experience that you could also
50th
do.
50th anniversary, pop the champagne, pop the glitter.
There we go. That's how you market it.
But these are tiny pieces of metal in your body.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not metal. Maybe they're edible.
Glitter?
Still edible? Not a great. Yeah, there's edible glitter.
People put jade eggs in their vagina. Please also don't put jade eggs in your vagina.
Why would you do that?
Oh,
what's that mean?
That's like Kegel. It's like Kegel workouts.
And there's this whole like holistic thing of like the energy in the stone can help you
I missed that
with your sexuality, and I'm like, please don't put porous things in your vagina. That can't, like, jade eggs can't be cleaned, so you're gonna get a nice just vagina
bacteria potty.
Yeah, basically.
You're just gonna have a bacteria orgy in your vagina.
Exactly. I'm like, don't do that. It's not gonna help you create this magical thing. It's gonna help you connect more with your muscles, maybe, but don't use an egg for that, please.
Right.
Don't use a real egg either.
Right. Right.
Could you imagine?
Because those can break.
They will break. Oh, that's a guarantee. They will.
I can't imagine they wouldn't.
What if it's like a hard-boiled one?
Although technically they come out of a small hole, so why couldn't you put it back into it? Okay, that's getting a side tangent. Okay.
I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say if it came out, it should stay out. We don't need to put it back in.
That's true.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Actually, I had an exam recently. This is going like super into detail, but I had an exam recently, and they had to exam something, and there was something that went in, and then they wanted to put it in again, and I was like, I think you're gonna need to change the covering, the sanitary covering. They're like, oh well, the hospital doesn't like to use waste, and I was like, nah girl, nah, like that no. put a new one on.
Please.
I don't care.
Isn't that primary infection control or like any control?
Yeah, she's like, it came out of you, and I was like, and now it's in the air for all of the bacteria to suction onto. Like, no.
Yeah.
Don't touch me with that.
Yeah. No,
and you
it's
said
oxidized.
Something. You said something. Imagine all the people who don't say something.
Yeah.
Right. That was my line in the sand. Like, I'll let things go by, but no. Nuh-uh. Nuh-uh, homie. But okay, so you touched on something earlier. That I know. I was trying to like go on fast enough that you So earlier you were kind of touching on this for a second, and it was about sexual trauma, like people who might have sexual trauma in their past, and who are not necessarily ready to talk about it. So people might come into your office and they just don't want to talk about it, or they've had bad experiences talking about it, or maybe they're just not ready to open up. And I think especially reading your website and going over the work that you do, the numbers were quite staggering of the amount of people who've experienced sexual trauma in their lifetime. So I think we don't need to get super specific into it, but on general terms, what can that present like? Like, how can that manifest in people's lives, just so we have a concept? And then if we think that that might be the possibility, how can you hold space for someone who may or may not have had sexual trauma and may or may not be ready to talk about it?
And may or may not know the extent to which they're feeling it.
Yeah.
My other, you know, that, and so defining trauma as well.
Yeah. I think that's actually the really great way to start, is like, how do we define trauma, and what people really name as trauma, and what we maybe as therapists, or as, you know, when we know what trauma really is at its core, we think about it differently than when someone says, well, I wasn't raped, so it's not trauma. And yet, you know, those negative dating experiences that you've had repeatedly absolutely can be trauma. And we need to really just stop thinking of trauma as these big, like, capital T, like these major events that happen to us. And really, trauma is anything that, it's really nervous system related, anything that makes our nervous system feel unsafe. Like, at its very core, like, that is what trauma is. And so a lot of people who come into our office have had some level of sexual trauma, but I actually don't even think of sometimes sexual trauma as separate. I just think of trauma more generally, because it doesn't have to have been a sexual trauma for it to manifest in their lives, in their sexuality especially. It can be completely unrelated. You know, even neglect can be a level of trauma that shows up in sexuality or in their sex life, because sex is about vulnerability and risk. And if we don't feel safe, you can't take those risks, you can't be vulnerable. And so that's how it's so easy to connect. Trauma is about lack of safety, and that lack of safety staying in our bodies. Our bodies remember it, even if our brains don't name it that way.
Oh, Ocean Bloom. We have a really dear friend of mine now, as a result of doing the podcast, actually. Ocean is a trauma release therapist. So I feel like you two would get along really well.
Yes.
Really well.
I love people say this, it's weird for me to say this, but I love trauma work, because it's really interesting, first of all, to like learn all about this, and it's fun and it's challenging, and yet it's also just really rewarding for everyone involved, because it's not about like that one thing that you do. It's more of a lens. It's more of almost like a lifestyle approach of working with trauma, rather than it's like, I'm going to use this one thing and it's going to fix everything. It's more holistic.
I like to think of it as like unlocking the rooms to my house life.
I like that.
So I'm like, I'm unlocking this door now. And sometimes what I like and what I love about how you're describing trauma being that kind of overarching feeling of not being safe, you then get to find different keys for different rooms and go, it was a little bit in there, or there's a sliding door to this is actually now the living room and the dining room are now connected. I'm really taking this metaphor
no, I like it,
but it's true, because as you're designing your life, like I think about my emotional real estate as well, and I'm like, I always think about it. A friend of mine, Lindsay Maxwell, once said to me, she was like, this person in your life is taking up a lot of emotional real estate. And I was like, I only want them to be like in one room, but right now they're in everywhere. And sometimes I think when we think about life design, when we think about our career design, when we think about our personal and professional development, we don't think about the intersectionality of it, and we don't think about the different things that we need to do to unlock at the same time. We just want that solution. We want one solution to a problem that we have that often is very surface and not actually deal with the underlying issue.
We're so solution based in our I'm like, that's capitalism for you.
It's Western society, I think, as well. And I would defer to both you and Raquelle for your wisdom on Western medicine versus Eastern. But growing up with traditional Chinese medicine in my surroundings, as well as Western medicine, in Hong Kong, it was like it's just a different culture, and it's more holistic.
I think so too, but I also think there's a lot of different cultures that are not as open with sexuality. So when we talk about sex specifically, I think some of the issues that can come up is from just not having those open conversations. And there are definitely a lot of cultures that just don't have those open conversations. Then there's also the issues of having maybe potentially damaging conversations about sex. But what are some of the common ways that sexual trauma could manifest? Like, what would that look like if you were with a partner and you're like, something's off, or I feel like, you know, maybe there's a wall here or a barrier or something's going on, and you're just like, what are some of the signs that someone may have had past trauma?
Oh, I'm like, the reason I sigh after, I'm like, because it could look so many ways. And I think sometimes people want that one of like, if you see this, it is this, or it could be this. And what I've learned over this work is, you know, one thing can show up in so many different ways for different people. Like, even, you know, not really enjoying sex or wanting to have sex can be a sign of trauma. It can also be asexuality. So we don't automatically, and sometimes it's just normal, just being a normal human and having a different range of sexual interest and desire. And sometimes that can also go the complete other direction, where someone just craves a lot of sex and wants to have a ton of it all the time. And that can also be a normal expression of sexuality. And it can also be a sign of trauma, where, I mean, we can understand that in so many different ways. Someone doesn't know how to connect in a deeper way, and that's, you know, it's more about the mechanics, the behavior, or it's just getting a chance to, you know, explore in this different way, and it feels like they don't have to focus on their emotions if they do this. It can be a distraction tool. So there's so many ways that it can show up, but I'd say common ways that it often shows up most often is an avoidance. It's a feeling of, I either don't really like sex that much, or, you know, I like it at the beginning, but then once the relationship maybe sets in a bit more, I don't want it as much. I don't like it as much. There's either during it, I feel really distracted, or I feel really emotional. I feel not present at all. Distractibility during sex, I mean, again, it can be so many things. It can also be anxiety, but trauma can definitely fuel into that, because ultimately trauma says, I don't want to be here right now. I don't want to be here because here is dangerous. And so, you know, I'd rather, if I can't physically escape, my mind will escape somewhere else.
And then how can, and I can totally see that. How could someone hold space? Because it's like you said earlier, some people may be ready to talk about it. Some people, maybe it would be harmful at that point of where they're at to talk about it. So you don't want to assume and push it, but at the same time, you want to create a space where if they're ready or willing to talk about it, that they can. So what would your recommendations be if you have a situation like that and you think that could be a reality for your partner?
Yeah, you know, I think there's ways we can support our partner, and sometimes with partners, we want to get in there, we want to know more, we want to dig into it, but like you said, sometimes it can be more harmful, and they might not be ready, they might not have the language for it. And so, you know, even just, I think the best thing we can do for our partners, or really for anyone, is actually more just make space for the present and what they're feeling right now, and not necessarily trying to connect it with like, why do you think that happens, or where do you think that comes from, but really, you know, talking about their experience right now and if they've had it in the past, and just the feelings they have. Most people have a lot of shame about feeling that, and shame loves isolation, so the more we don't talk about how we're feeling, the greater shame gets, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So when we can start to name how they're feeling and just validate it and hold space for that, the shame actually decreases, because you're basically putting out the fire where shame can burn.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really, I love that. Shame loves isolation.
Yes. It's very Brene Brown is what I'll say.
Oh, we were just listening to one of her first podcast actually the other day.
Oh, her stuff's really good.
Oh, it's so great.
So good.
So great. One of the things that I wanted to go back to, just take 2 steps back, around what kind of people would want to go, what kind of people go and see a sex counselor. And, you know, I kind of wanted to understand how much is proactive and how much is reactive, because for me personally, like, I would love to be able to afford to go to a sex counselor proactively in a stage of feeling safe already, in order to elevate a greater connection with whoever I'm with, and add that to my kind of, just add it as like I would go to the gym, or like you would go to, you know, you would, not as often obviously, but how many people actually come proactively to you, and how many people are, you know, sort of are coming through like out of a sense of pain?
I'd say it's very rare for people to come proactively.
Wow. I wonder if there are proactive workshops that, like, do you host the proactive ones of like elevate your sex game?
Not really. I think because that's also maybe part of our approach, or our work is much more about the deeper work and healing what's not working underneath. I'd say when proactively, sometimes people come when they're not in crisis per se.
Right.
And so in some ways, like, what does proactive mean, I guess, is the question. Is proactive like they're not in a stage of crisis, or is it there's nothing that's happened to them, which is questionable if there's anyone who's had nothing happen to them in some way or another, or hasn't been affected by negative messaging, and ultimately, I mean, our culture is just traumatizing us repeatedly around sexuality. So in some ways it's like, what does proactive really mean? And I think that's where a lot of, like, in some ways I do get proactive clients who are maybe not in an active stage of crisis, and they're at a place where, like, I'm ready to work on myself. I want to better myself. And I'm right now feeling like I'm in a really good place. Not that common. I'd say that's maybe 10 to 20% at most. But those people have absolutely had their share of trauma, their share of negative experiences and beliefs that we have to unpack and work through and change. And sometimes it's really, like, sometimes my work is really just educational. Sometimes it really is just sharing a lot of information for people to take in and recognize, you know, how they're operating under really a false narrative. And here's this new narrative that you can use. And that's all some people need.
I love that. Oh my God, it's like CBT.
I hate CBT, but that's another story. I hate a strong word.
Dislike.
But that's new narratives. It's new thought processes. You're just changing your thoughts.
Yes.
This is why I think
you're like cringing when I say that, but
but the whole gamut of, like, the different types of therapies, some work really well for some people, and, you know, you don't know what someone's gone through and what they actually need. And I guess that's why I like that you said that about what is proactivity, because ultimately, like, I don't study other people's sex lives. I don't know where I stand in terms of, if I'm like, is my sex life healthy? In my mind, it is. And then sometimes I'm like, maybe this is not. And especially if you're with a partner, or you're having sexual experiences with someone who has a very different normal, or has been around a different culture that that some things that you would be like uncomfortable with are everyday, like common things for this other person or these other people, or whatever, however you want to like interact. So and then the other piece of, at what point how would you go about recognizing that this is impacting your sex life, right? Like as soon as you said anxiety, I was like, oh my gosh, when I'm in a really high stress situation, and this is going to be, we're going to be brave and live full right now. When I'm in a high stress situation, I want to have sex. Because it helps me to regulate my system. And I just to be really clinical about it. Like I love sex. Sorry, Mom and Dad, listen to every single episode of this.
You're like, oh no, I just said it.
And culturally, this is a very difficult thing. Like I can feel myself going red just saying it, because I'm from an Asian culture where this is not good. This is not something we talk about. However, I don't want that to be the case going forward. I would like for us to be able to say, look, hey, I feel healthy and I feel safe and I feel good in all aspects of my body and my world. But anyway, so, see, I've gone and flustered myself just by saying it.
I'm proud of you for saying it, though.
Thank you. Be brave, live full, and be angry at Raquelle later for making me do this.
Safe space.
If it makes you feel better, I'm the opposite. When I feel stressed, I don't want sex whatsoever, and I'm often in a state of stress. Right. So it's like, ooh, I do not want to be here right now. I do not want to be having sex right now.
What about people who are like, who consider themselves asexual? How can you explain that to me? I know that's a sidebar, but like just thinking about the, like, when someone wants to have sex and you saying that, like, when you're in this state, this is so when someone feels like they are asexual or they're not as interested in sex anymore, what could be happening? And that's potentially, I'm assuming, a normal thing to be that way too. But let's assume that is. I mean, I'm assuming that is normal. But what are the factors that you could be looking at?
I think one of the most common things that even when I train therapists, especially, what I often talk about, it's like, what is just natural low desire and the changes of desire that we all experience? Because also we're not stagnant. We will change how much we want sex over our entire lives. So right now you talk about stress. When you're stressed, you want sex. 10 years down the line, that might not be true anymore.
Right.
And so kind of discovering that your normal always shifts. I think the difference with, between that and asexuality is that doesn't shift. Someone who is asexual or on the asexual spectrum, their desire for sex does not shift based on stress, based on, happiness, based on connection with their partner. Their motivator for if they do have sex, because asexual people have sex often if they want to, right? But it doesn't come from a place that, like, it doesn't come from an intrinsic drive per se. It doesn't come from a place of like, I am sexually attracted to my partner, or I want to have sex. Oh, hello, kitty.
Hi, cat.
Yeah, I have all the cats. And
you're a crazy cat sex lady.
Yeah,
that's so great. Oh, gosh, you're my hero.
I've never put it together like that.
Well, yes. You. Well, you're so welcome.
But with asexuality, it's really, it doesn't come from that feeling of I'm sexually attracted to my partner, or I feel turned on, or I feel horny. It comes from I either like, I just want to feel connected to my partner, or my partner is initiating, and I want to be present with my partner. I want to be there for my partner.
Like, I'm going to do the shopping because it's going to be helpful.
Yeah, and they can enjoy it. Sometimes, sometimes I love grocery shopping, and sometimes it's like, I don't really want to be here. And for someone who might be on the asexual spectrum, their motivator is not going to be like, I am horny or I'm in the mood. And that's never going to be their driving factor. And actually, even people who aren't asexual, that's kind of that's the secret, really, is when you have that lower sex drive, the secret is don't wait until you're in the mood or you're horny, because that's going to happen maybe once in a blue moon right now. So, but we can actually choose to start, and there's things then that we can do to make it enjoyable that then gets our body to be like, oh, actually, I like this and I want this.
Oh my God, that's like goals in life.
Yeah.
Like, don't wait until you're motivated, because motivation goes in and out. Just start, and that's gonna flow.
Yeah.
But I have a question on that, because I wanted to talk to you about basically the roller coaster of relationships. And for people who are not asexual, let's just say, you know, they're not on that spectrum, there are still ebbs and flows, and there are going to be moments where you're feeling super passionate and you're not, and whatever. And I think what happens a lot of times in sex, at least this is what I see, is a lot of people internalize something that's going on. So you tried to initiate sex, your partner turned it down.
Yeah. Now
there's something wrong with you. You must look bad, or you must whatever. Like something is off about you. Your energy was off. Maybe you feel like you shouldn't have initiated. So I see a lot of internalization in happenings for sex. And I think that's both for men and women. I think that's something that happens on both sides. So can you talk about that? Like, what are because there's going to be tons, what are some of the different factors that might change through a relationship, or even just through a timeline, people's sexual desire, and how can you stay distant enough that you don't take that on?
There's so many factors, and I usually break them down into 5. If I can name them right now, that would be surprising off the top of my head, but I can talk about it more generally. You know, we always want to look at, there's always going to be like biological and medical things that can happen, whether that's hormonal, whether that's medication that we're taking, whether that's chronic pain, aging can be a part of it as well. Again, we naturally just go through different phases. Even just life stages can make a difference. You know, who you were in your 20s when you maybe were more carefree and partying and having fun, versus who maybe you're in your 30s and 40s when you have more responsibilities. Even in the same relationship, you're not the same person. And but we have this idea, because we live in our bodies every day, that we are really the same person just every single day, and yet we're not. You know, our responsibilities do change, our external context changes. So those are maybe some of the broader things we want to think about. Relationship dynamics can definitely play a factor in it if we're not feeling connected, if things are maybe rocky. And again, we also just go through developmental stages in relationships as well, where we feel closer at times and not as close at other times. And that's normal as well. I think people jump into that being a problem. And I think a lot of it is just normalizing that everything ebbs and flows. You know, our relationships ebb and flow, our attractions, our desire, everything. So when we can normalize that, then it doesn't freak us out as much. So, I mean, not always. People usually have a hard time really believing that, or really believing that applies to them. Sometimes we're like, yeah, that applies to other people, but not to me. And I mean, I think anxiety still comes back to being one of the biggest reasons people's desire tends to ebb and flow, whether that's anxiety about life, anxiety about the relationship, about themselves, their own, you know, mental health issues. But one of the first things I'm always looking at is like, what is your relationship to stress and anxiety? Because for most people, stress and anxiety pumps the brakes. Not for Kristina, it does the opposite for her, but that also is a thing. So like,
but I think that like, I understand that too. Cause I think for me, at least, if it's more anxiety driven, like if this is like the house, like Maslow's, right, hierarchy. Yeah, so if we start looking at that, if it's like safety, where I'm going to live, food, those are going to trump sex. But if it's high stress at work, yes. Or even if it's just like a stressful time in general, but I'm taken care of, I'm going to be okay. Yeah. Yes, I'm all on. But I actually had a quick question for you. How would you communicate with your partner if there's a slump? So let's just say it's gone on for a while. Yeah. You've kind of sat back. You're like, okay, maybe they're going through something. It's been a few months. We'll just paint a scenario.
And just to cut in, a while is a while for you, right? Like, so for me, the definition of what a while is you're feeling like, oh, my needs are not being met, right? Is that what you're saying?
Or let's say 3 months. Let's put a time on it.
It's different for different people. So I think it's...
Yeah, but I'm going to put a time on it. for this one.
Okay, but
because I'm gonna paint you an exact picture.
Right. Okay.
Okay, I'm painting you a picture, and you can just answer to this specific one. Okay, so it's been 3 months, and I'm not saying you haven't had any sex, but it just feels like you're constantly initiating or something. You're feeling that something is off, and the spark isn't there as much as it would. How would you recommend someone would talk to their partner about that?
I love that question. Well, first of all, because you're asking, how do you communicate about that? Most people don't communicate about it. They either avoid the conversation because they don't think it's going to go well, or they don't think anything is going to happen. So they also start to avoid initiating anything. Or if they do talk about it, it becomes like a blame game of like, why don't you want sex? Like what, why am I always initiating? You never and always. I'm like, take those words and throw them out. I was gonna swear there, and I don't know if that's okay, so I didn't do it.
You can swear.
I was like, and throw them out. Really, just throw them out, because they don't help. Nothing is always and nothing is never. It's very rare that we actually have that. And so in relationships and communicating, using those words doesn't generally go well. But communicating from a place, I always talk about communicating from what you're feeling, and then just really getting curious about your partner's experience. So it's like, I've been feeling, and I know people hate the cliche, I feel blank. And so don't use the cliche, I feel blank when you do this, and because like don't do that. Like nobody likes that. But you can still talk about how you feel. Like, I've been feeling really lonely, I've been feeling really disconnected from you. I actually said this to my partner the other night. I was like, I feel really disconnected from you. And I actually feel less disconnected just by having that conversation, just by saying, I feel disconnected from you. Nothing changed.
So if you aren't used to having that kind of conversation, what's a first way of doing that? Because immediately I can hark back to previous relationships where in intimate and non-intimate capacities, where I've said something about how I'm feeling, and that person, like Raquelle said earlier, has taken ownership of it, and then I've had to now make this about helping them to feel better when I'm the one with a problem.
Totally.
Right?
Totally been there.
And even when it's not a sexual thing or an intimacy thing, if it's just a, hey, I'd like to share with you, like, what is a way that you can start a conversation that you've never had before with a person, because you're working on being a better person, and you know that they are going to respond in a way that is going to then cause you to have to mitigate them as well as try and forge yourself forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I say name that. Like, name that I want to talk about something I've never, like, I feel really uncomfortable or awkward talking about. And even naming how they might feel. It's like, I know you, like, I think you might feel this, or in case you feel this, I want you to know that this is me expressing what I need or what's happening for me. And also knowing the truth is that that's just kind of how dynamics work, is when we share something, we will go back and forth. But even just naming, like, I really want to share what I feel. If you have a reaction to it, or if you feel something else afterwards, like, we can talk about that as well. So letting them know that you also care about what they feel, because they're going to have a reaction, without it now becoming about reassuring them. Even just kind of setting that boundary a little bit of, I want to talk about this. This is about me and what I'm feeling. I can imagine you might start to have your own feelings or reactions. I usually say, like, reassure them, like, I want you to know I still love you, I care about you, this is because I want things to be better. And if you feel anything after we're done talking, like, I do want to hear what you're feeling as well. So then you're kind of setting it up for, they know there's going to be space. Sometimes you have to remind them, this is a perfect situation where you can do this. And a lot of it is troubleshooting, right? But especially if you don't have these conversations, also knowing they're going to be bumpy to start. They're going to be tough, and they're not going to go scripted the way that, they tell you in all these books of, like, when you communicate with I feels, your partner is going to say, I understand. Like, no, most partners are not going to say that. But by just keep doing it, and even just that of, like, how did this feel? So like, asking, like, did that feel weird? Could I have brought it up in a different way? So after you have that conversation, checking in on how the check-in went, can actually be really helpful, because then you can kind of proactively talk about, how about next time you're feeling something like this, can we maybe talk about it when I haven't maybe just initiated and you felt rejected? Maybe we can talk about a more neutral space, right? So then you're kind of figuring out what works for you as a couple.
I love, 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 underline, bold, repeat, that you said to start with, I still love you. Yeah. I'm talking about this because I want to work on it with you. Because I had a tough conversation the other day, and I ended with that because I noticed there was anxiety. And so it was like, P.S., I'm having this conversation because I'm working on us. Yeah. Because I love you.
But make the P.S. the first thing you say.
Right. But I hadn't even contemplated starting with that. And I think people would be a lot more receptive if you start with that, because then their nervous system isn't going, danger, danger, I'm going to lose this person. And then they shut down.
Oh right? My gosh, totally. Oh gosh. And it's funny because I think we presuppose as well. Like, I look at Raquelle and I have this conversation all the time where we're like, and with so many of our friends, right? We look like the type of people that have our shit together. So people assume that they can be a certain way in our most intimate, you know, relationships, friendships, and all of those things. You know, we forget, and Raquelle and I have actually, I think I'm pretty proud of us that we've started learning how to do this more, where we're like, affirmation. I'm recognizing right now that this is a really hard time for you, and I'm very proud of what you're doing. Now we have to solve this problem or do this thing, but I need you to know that I'm proud of you, and I think that you're doing an amazing job. Yeah. And you know, when it comes to relationships, I think that's something that I've definitely failed at in the past with others, is that I've not established the I am here and I am committed to this relationship. Yeah. And without that, you're just expressing things that make you
negative,
that are negative. Yeah. But then the question I have underneath that is, sometimes these relationships that you might be in are casual. If it's a casual relationship, and this is where, you know, I have a lot of friends in communities that are much more fluid with their, and there's the pun, much more fluid with their relationships. You know, they're different, they're not conventional. So in that space, and I know that for the most part, a lot of people who are a little bit more relationship fluid, that sounds,
let's say like open relationships, polyamory,
non-monogamy
partners.
Typically, from my experience and knowing those settings, there's a lot more thought and a lot more conversation already in order to have. There are some great books on it, some great resources on it, but how do you establish safety in a casual setting, or in dating, or if you're just starting to get to know someone else sexually, how do you establish a safety to talk about it?
The trick is really that there's no difference. I think we treat casual relationships in these ways of like, we're not allowed to have like as many feelings, or we're not allowed to express things the same way because you know, they don't owe us as much. And yet what we're asking is not about them owing us anything. It's about being kind human beings. It's about being like caring partners. It doesn't matter if I just met you off the street at a bar, basically, or if we've been dating for like 6 years. Yes, there's different conversations, of course, in those relationships, but at its core, it's about, how do you be a partner that gives a shit? Like, really, that's what it is. And if that person also doesn't really want to engage in those conversations with you, it's questioning of like, do you want to have a casual relationship with that person? Like, do you want to have a casual relationship with someone who you can't maybe talk about their reaction when you can't orgasm, let's say, right? If you can't bring that up, you're probably also never going to orgasm with that person, because that's a pretty big sign about your body saying, oh, this person is not safe. And so I think in some ways it's the way we treat casual relationships in, like, when we're not in that non-monogamous community. And that's what we can really learn from the ethical non-monogamy community, is that we can and should talk about these things with anybody. and that those intimate conversations aren't reserved just for like monogamous, exclusive, romantic relationships.
I think it's so interesting that you brought that up in that way, because I find for myself, the more casual a relationship is, the easier it is oftentimes for me to talk about stuff, because I don't have any attachments, or I shouldn't say I don't care, but like there's less of an emotional state where I really care if this person stays.
It's way less vulnerable. It's way less risky.
It's less vulnerable. It's less risky. Exactly. Yeah. And when you care about someone a lot, at least for me, I really care about their feelings. And until I hit that point, I'm pretty like, it's okay if I lose the person. I don't get overly attached very quickly. So having those conversations are easy. It's like, oh, you're either going to take my boundary or you're going to leave it. And I'm okay with that. But
I think that's also going into the bigger conversation of society, right? Like that's the conversation of when, you know, for me, I agree with you, Raquelle. I feel very, very similar to that. But what would happen then is I would go and seek my those experiences in and of themselves and not be able to marry the two, pun intended, but you know, and not able to bring those things together and live as a whole being, as a whole sexual being, rather than exercising this version of me in this capacity. Because what would then happen is I've been in experiences where I'm like, oh, I'm bold and adventurous and brave out here, and then with a committed relationship that kind of like wilts. Because
but do you feel fulfilled in the committed relationship, or do you feel like you are lacking something?
Well, I have felt like I've been lacking something because I haven't felt like I've fully showed up, and because I have in previous, you know, like in those casual relations, I've allowed myself to be a different type of person rather than acknowledging who I am as a whole, and then being as kind to a casual relationship as I would to a committed one, which to me is, you know, we talk a lot about the membrane versus the wall. And
I was like, I don't even find out what that is.
No, we made it up. It's we're currently pushing our own boundaries of learning how to be resilient and vulnerable on this show. But also share from the scar and not the wound. So we're not trying to exorcise our demons on a show. What we're wanting to do is exercise and create a membrane rather than set up walls around ourselves.
The membrane basically saying you can allow certain things to come out and in, and other things you can control to stay within the path you want it to, and then the boxes are very segmented. So like I'm traditionally a very compartmentalized person, so I can show up here and feel one way and show up here and no one would ever know that
that's why I talk about parts of ourselves. You have, you know, as a whole, you have parts of you. You know, you have the part of you that can show up really, really easily in casual relationships because it feels like the dynamic works for it and it feels safe, and yet put that same part of you in a committed relationship and all of its underlying fears and wounds get activated. It's like, nope, I can't do this here, right? And so then you have other parts of you that kind of protect that scared part of you that can't communicate in the same way.
And this is why I want, again, I'm bringing back to the house analogy, is I'd like a house where all my doors are open. They don't have to be wide open all the time, and I might need to shut them every now and then in different rooms. But I want to have the keys, and I want to be able to keep those doors open, because otherwise things get stagnant. And this is where body trauma, you know, where we talk about trauma release in your body. You know, when you compartmentalize and too much, and you're cutting off a part of you for another. That sometimes that is a solution, and I think that's a short-term thing, but I'm you know, I don't think that it's necessarily the way that this generation and beyond needs to necessarily be in our society. I think that
brings up actually something I was thinking about when I was doing research for this episode, and I was thinking about just life situations that happen, and one of the things that came up is similar to you, Kristina. I had a life before where I may have been into certain things, and I think this happens a lot with people. Even I have friends who are, for example, they're bisexual, and maybe their partner currently is, I'm just going to throw this out there, a guy. And prior, I think this is the easiest one to demonstrate what I'm trying to say. Maybe prior relationships were with women. And sometimes you see these guys who have an idea that you should now want to be with women as well, and maybe they should be pulled into that. Or maybe in the past you had open relationships, or you had threesomes, or you, whatever it was that you may have done, that now that should be something you're always into. But I am a firm believer that different chemistry is created with different people, and it pulls out different parts of you. And if you're missing a part of you, of course, then that's something you need to address. But if you're not missing anything and you're feeling whole and satisfied, and like, yeah, you tried those things and they were fun in the moment, but they're not something you have any desire to carry on, there seems to be this idea that that's just who you are. You did those things and that's who you are, and you should probably still want to do those things. And it's a very odd mentality. And I was wondering if you see that a lot in your practice, because I've seen it around me with my friends and myself. And yeah, I was just curious if that's something that you run into.
Oh, I was gonna say absolutely, especially, you know, when that was, you know, I even thought about a particular client that popped into my head as you were saying that, where, you know, that was part of their life before and that felt really right. And in this current relationship, that feels really like that just doesn't fit their dynamic. And in some ways it's like, is it because they really just don't connect with those experiences anymore? They don't want to have them anymore? Or do they have a belief or a narrative around what this relationship is supposed to look like now, because it's this type of relationship? And so then they kind of put aside those other parts of themselves to show up in this one, thinking they can't have them all be present. But it's almost like it often doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like something they have to do. And they don't choose to put aside those parts of themselves. It feels like this is where it has to be in order to make this relationship work. And the
that's an icky feeling.
It's an awful feeling. And I was gonna say the bisexuality example is a whole other tangent that I could also get really fumey about, but
why?
Well, just, I mean, I think the example that you gave there, Raquelle, is really that it comes back to the hypersexualization of women with other women, and this entitlement of, you know, this is, you know, if this is what you want, you still want that, and therefore I need to be a part of it. And even looking at the permission often in a relationship for someone who is bisexual, it's pretty common for that person to be given permission to be sexual with other women who are probably more femme. They look a certain way, and they have because it's part of the fantasy. It's part of like that male gaze that's really hot and attractive. And in some ways it really shows the devaluing of those relationships and of those attractions, because it's like, oh, I'm not okay with non-monogamy. We are a monogamous couple, but if you're sexual with another woman and that woman looks exactly like this, then it's okay.
It's like the fetishization. Is that the I don't know why I'm all sudden fetishization. Okay, yeah. Sorry. I don't know why I just that blurted. But yeah, because that actually okay, so I'm tangenting because there's so much I want to talk to you about, and I really dug into this. Sorry, Kristina, but
I'm having a great time with my Bailey's coffee, my hair of the dog.
She's just gonna throw a dildo across the room. It's gonna be fine.
That's how you know she's done. She's put the dildo on the wall. I'm done with this. My turn.
It's a sign for everything.
Welcome.
Right. Meeting has started. Meeting has ended.
You just need a
coffee time.
Just gonna be a line of them.
A lot.
Oh my god. But the fetishization in general, and I've been seeing this in so many places, in my opinion, and I don't work in this space, and I'm not hugely present in this space, so this is why I wanted to bring this up with you. But one thing that came up a few years ago. I did one of those like yes, no, maybe things, which was with my partner, which was super fun. Yeah. Highly recommend it. It was a great time. It's like, just if you don't know what it is, it's essentially a big list of sexual acts or things that you may or may so much fun. Do. And it's kind of like a game, and you get to go through and you say like, yes, I'd be into this, no, I wouldn't, like hardline no, or maybe this is something we could possibly try at some point. And so you go through it and you go through the list and whatever. And it was fine. Like I said, it was really fun, and it was enlightening, and it was just like a lighthearted thing. But I've noticed, and I thought this was really interesting, since maybe it was before this, but really since like post 50 Shades of Grey, there's this like massive BDSM movement and I would say power play movement, even further than just BDSM. And so one thing that kind of irked me, and I'm not any stranger to it, I'm not worried about it, like I have nothing against BDSM or any power play or whatever, but this list was huge. It was like 2 full papers long and like small writing. There's a lot of things on that list.
My list is 5 pages long, if it makes you
Is it 5 pages? Okay, yeah, they're
long.
long. Yeah. They're long lists. And
yeah.
I would say like a vast majority of them were very much to do with power play. And I thought it was really interesting because I'm like, there's gotta be a lot more ways to connect with a partner. And I'm not saying those things should be off the table, but it was just such like a difference in the weight of like, you know, all fours in a ball gag and like nothing to do with sensual connection. And I was like, that just seems like such a fetishization of that part of sex. Like I thought that was really bizarre. And what also worried me is I was thinking of people looking at it and thinking that that was a normal sexual relationship for people who are trying to like spice up their sex or whatever it is that they're, I mean, I think that's the only aim of doing those things, really. You're trying to take it to the next level or whatever. But I thought that was potentially problematic, because if people aren't into that, but they're thinking that's what they should be into, and it's like, Kristina, you were saying earlier, like, I don't know what normal is because I don't know what other people are doing. And then you're seeing these lists come out and you're like, oh, that's what's normal? Like, I'm not normal. I'm very boring, or whatever it is they start thinking. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you if you've seen any trends like that. And I don't know, like, is there good resources out there for other things that don't necessarily have as much, or is a more balanced list that people could find, or resources in general? I don't know if there's like blogs or magazines or whatever.
I don't think there are as many, because I think when you were talking there, I think all my brain could go to is that we have really created such a distinction between being intimate with someone, which is like the cuddling, the kissing, and like that kind of touch, and like the erotic side, and we've missed everything in between. And then again, we also wonder why there's so many sexual problems, is because people want to jump from kissing and like holding hands to like power play, and
to like spitting in someone's face.
Yeah. And they've missed building everything that creates the safety to spit in someone's face, really. Like, there's all these other types of touch that most people even just want and need in order to feel the even desire to try that or experiment with that. And so, I mean, you're right, because a lot of these lists are very heavily weighted in that. I think sometimes a part of it is wanting to give people ideas and open things up, and showing people that those are also really healthy and normal ways to explore your sexuality. But you're right in the sense that it misses the more sensual side of things, and that's really what we're missing as, I think I'd say, as a community, as a society,
as a culture,
a culture, is, you know, having intimacy in sensuality, and even sexuality not even just being like intercourse and all of these, you know, different types of more intense or kinky type of play, but that really anything can be sex and anything can be sexual. And when people think they're boring, it's because no one's considering everything else as sex. They're not considering even something like, you know, like giving each other hickeys like that. I know we have that on our list actually, and our yes, no, or maybe, like that can be really, really like sexual and sensual as well, and sexual, but people are like, oh, but that's like what they kind of put that as lesser than. They say like, oh, but that's like a means to get someone like turned on, or that's a means to do I don't know what to get to blank. So we kind of created like a separation of like we do all of this sensual stuff in order to have all this erotic stuff,
or just jump into the erotic stuff. Like, it's actually interesting because I'm just thinking back, and I remember this past year, one of my most sensual experiences or most sexual experiences was a hug. We were both so hyper turned on by this hug, like no other touching, just a hug. But I think oftentimes it's all of the stuff surrounding that. It's how you feel about the person. It's anticipation on what could happen. It's how long since you've seen that person. It's all of these things around it that can set that up. It's the vibe. It's, you know, it's all of those things that can build that moment up. And I would say that was far more erotic feeling than a lot of these other things that we've also done and tried and whatever. And those are fun. And sometimes are very erotic. But like it can really, there should be a lot more transit, I think, between them.
And they're not mutually exclusive.
No.
I think that's the thing. I think that's what, you know, that's the thing that, again, why it's so difficult to kind of graduate from society's want for us, or even if it's not so much the case now, but that express construct of being something that's taboo, it being something that you know, and having to a forced compartmentalization of yourself. You know,
well, I think that's what the non-kink community, I think, unfortunately does, is they treat these kinky experiences or play or whatever it might be as these like things to spice up their experiences. But if we look at people in the kink community that are actually engaging with this often, a lot of it is built off of a different dynamic. They're actually starting, even like the power aspect of it, there is an exchange of that energy between these people who are about to do this, that when you do kink play, when you're not kinky, when you're not normally kinky, is usually just like, okay, I'm gonna whip you and that's gonna be hot. It's like, but if someone is actually doing whipping as an actual like experience and it's really hot, they probably haven't just started whipping that person and thought it was really sexual. It's been a
they didn't just walk past. I'm done.
Right? They built up to it. There's been this, they've agreed to it, they've negotiated it. There's been all this build up into it. But again, when we do these lists and we treat these, we almost treat each item as a separate action item.
Yes.
We miss the like fluidity of it and how it all needs to be built on a basis of sensuality. And
I think there's the safety. There's the safety.
Yes.
It's that respect, you know?
The base of respect. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's I think it's, I mean, even just having this conversation, which is so wonderful, so enlightening. But understanding that you've got this basis of that inherent need for safety first, and then a basis of respect, and then communication tools. That then, you know, if any one of these at any point is missing, then these are doors and rooms in your house that you need to kind of start looking into. And some of it might be speaking to a sex therapist or a sex counselor like yourself. And some of it might be going to a trauma release therapist. And some of it might be going to a cognitive behavioral therapist, or sorting out your finances and going for a run and being less stressed in your life. Like, there's so many things, I think, that, and I'm so honored that we get to have this show and have people who are listening and us engaging and us all being able to have these conversations that are really brave, but also allow us to find more doors to open. So, I'm really glad that you're all here. I'm really glad that we get to, and I'm so glad that we have that privilege to be able to speak to people in a candid way without wanting to put anyone in a position of not feeling included.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It can be culturally hard. Religion is a very important, dynamic to acknowledge, and your gender preferences, your identity, how where you're from and where you're going, so I know this was in some ways a tough talk. In other ways, like, I hope that you felt safely uncomfortable when we were talking, and I think
we refrained from putting the porn on, so
we didn't. Yeah, we didn't. That's
I mean, we're not done yet. We could.
We totally can. But Diana, what would you say is one of the things that you would leave people with in general, if you were to give them, if they were like, I'm kind of okay with my sex life, I'm kind of, or this has piqued some interest, what direction would you potentially point someone in now at the end of this conversation?
That's a good question.
If they're interested in going, like they want to try new things, is that your question?
If they've listened to this whole podcast show and are interested in learning more one way or another, are interested in either going to see, so is there a central resource, is there a website, is there like sexfriends.com, is I don't know what.
Maybe split the trauma. Okay, if someone feels like they want to see someone for sexual trauma, and then if someone is ready to explore some new sides of themselves, where can they go?
Well, the trauma, I'm just going to say go and see Diana.
It's not you, it's Diana.
She wants to answer it. I was like, you can answer it.
AKA pimp yourself out.
I mean, I think unfortunately there isn't one central resource. I wish there was. I was like, maybe I'll put that on my list of future endeavors of creating a central list. I often go back to be honest, I don't always come back to me. I come back to like one resource that I love and that I actually recommend to pretty much everyone that I can get to listen or read to this book. I recommend it to them. It's required reading for when I teach at universities. I always put this on the list of required readings. It's not a textbook, but it's almost better than a textbook. It's called Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. It is technically about female sexuality, but it's really, I want even people to throw that out, because what she talks about is life-changing. It changes people of all genders' lives, about themselves, about their messaging. It helps you unpack in a really gentle way. It also has resources as well, but it gives you all this information that will, without a doubt, at least one piece will change your life. I've listened to this book. I've listened to it at least 6 times now. I've also read it a handful of times, and I always take away something new. Because there is so much valuable information. It's a thick book. I'm not going to pretend it's not. And so, don't feel like you have to try and get through it all, but it really will, it sparks conversations and thoughts you would never otherwise have.
Wow, that is the perfect way
to
round off this wonderful conversation.
Where can people find you, Diana?
They can find me. I feel like the most likely place to find me is really just through our social media and through our website. I'm not actually the most active on social media because I wish I could like it more than I do. I don't love it as much. So I think usually the best way is just through our website. So I'm like, do I put that out there? I feel like
say it.
It's www.olrscenter.com. I'm working on expanding our resources as well, because this is what people ask us for. They ask us for resources about, books, toys, videos, whatever it might be. And I'm like, this is what people are wanting. This is what people are needing. And they don't need to see me or anyone on my team, to be honest, to be able to have this information. They shouldn't. It should be more accessible.
Well, thank you.
You're amazing.
You are amazing. Thank you for brunching with us.
Thank you for having me. That was so much fun. Dildo. Oh, I should have brought the dildo so I could have done that. I was like, there's a clitoris somewhere. There's a clitoris behind me, but that's as far as that's all I have today.
But your head is covering it.
We can say hi to her anyways.
Okay.
Aww.
Hi to the clitoris.
Oh, hi, clitoris.
It looks like a bird.
Yeah, like a penguin.
I know. People never realize that this is what a clitoris looks like, but this is it. If anyone ever watches this, it's like this is what it looks like.
If anyone ever watches this.
I meant the video. You probably have more people who listen than who watch.
Not anymore. Everyone's going to be like, well, second round.
I need to see this video.
Yeah. And our invisible dildos, our invisidildos.
I know. They need to see the constant, just like,
yes.
Things that aren't there on the wall.
Yes.
And I feel like Kristina's in the perfect like corner because she can actually like
she can reach it.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Like, I feel like when I do it, my hand goes away. I'm reading into nothing.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.